What is happening in the market? Why do you think it's a challenge for people to like land roles?
In a state of economic uncertainty, companies freeze hiring and people stay in their jobs.
Yeah.
The job market is actually more globalized now. So the talent pool is huge. So it's incredibly competitive. I always say that you need to make yourself a person that opportunity chases. You don't chase the opportunities, they chase you. After doing recruitment and realizing how much companies pay to hire people, I've worked on projects where a company's paid 40, 50K for one person. You're making the hiring manager's life easier by knowing how to interview so they can give you the job. The skill of interviewing, I call it a skill because it's something that if you understand can really open doors for you and can change your life.
Like you say, it's a skill, right? So how do you get better at that skill of interviewing?
If I can put it into 3 steps for someone. 1, in the preparation, understanding the company, the role, and how you fit into that. As much as it's important to have hard skills, soft skills are really important as well. Can you build rapport with the interviewer? Because an interview should be a conversation. It's not just about them, it's about you too.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the STAR method is great, but I think the SELL method is even better. Whatever you say, you need to be able to back it up with evidence. You should have 3 key stories that you tell in an interview.
In terms of salary expectations, what's the rules for asking for what you really want?
You're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people. Like
you have to be able to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
When you grow up in ends, you don't realize it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Atto. We have a special guest in the building. We have Amie, who's a former recruiter in the pharmaceutical industry, where she helped job seekers land roles in this industry. She did this for 5 years, and now currently she's a proposal manager in clinical research and the founder of For My Interview. Amie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm good. How's your day been?
Oh my God, so busy.
Yeah.
So much work, so many proposals coming through. I'm actually glad that the day's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can just have a nice chat.
Yeah. It's mad because obviously it's like just before Christmas as well, and it's this busy, right? Like it's like there's always like this kind of rush just before Christmas. Yeah, it's mad. So, I introduced you. Who would you say Amie is?
Well, that's a big question. Well, I'd like to say I'm an interview strategist, which means I create interview and job-related content online on my channel For My Interview. But I'm also a proposals manager, you've mentioned, in clinical research. And that's something that I came into because I started off as a recruiter, but my background is scientific. So I really wanted to be in a position where I wasn't just placing people into scientific jobs. I wanted to be the person doing the scientific job. So I did a whole career change, and got into the pharmaceutical industry. More than that, I guess I'm a person who loves to travel. I've been to nearly 20 countries. I lived in China for a year. Yeah. I love reading like informational, instructional content. The best book I read this year was The 12-Week Year, which is such a great book. It's really changed my life, actually.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's mad because after we actually tried to record this podcast, being transparent people, we had technical difficulties. We tried to record this podcast. And actually, I got the book now. I ordered it. So
excellent.
So I'm planning my next year with that book. So thanks for the recommendation.
No problem. It's really enabled me to organize myself better. And it's the reason why I'm able to post on socials consistently. Yeah. I'd recommend.
That's mad. I love that. And so, I guess you mentioned that you were a recruiter, right? How did that happen?
Well, I graduated in 2011, and that was just the aftermath of the 2008 recession happening. And so it was quite tough to get jobs at the time. But a really good friend of mine got a job in recruitment, and she recommended me and I got the job, and I started off doing education recruitment. And then I thought, actually, I've got a biomedical science degree, so I want to do something that's at least scientific. So I got into pharmaceutical recruitment, and I discovered an array of pharmaceutical jobs, which is the reason that it's what inspired me to actually get back into science and back into the pharmaceutical industry.
Really? Okay.
But starting off in recruitment was the best because I really learnt how to interview, what the job market is really saying, what the recruitment process really is, because I didn't know about all of these things before, because you don't get taught these things at school. You don't get taught how to interview really. But doing this job really opened my eyes and taught me a lot about how to position myself when I'm going after opportunities. And it's the beginning for my interview really.
Okay. What's interesting about that is that you were taught a fundamental life skill without even knowing that you're going to get a fundamental life skill
exactly
from that, which is interviewing, right? I think it's strange that, like you said, at school, they don't teach us. They do all this whole thing about education, get a job, but they don't teach us how to actually get the job. So you're kind of like having to like teach yourself like kind of what to do is a bit mad.
Exactly. And it's the reason why I wanted to actually create content online, because I found that friends of mine always contact me to ask me for advice about their interviews, about their CVs, and I always had advice to give, and I actually enjoyed giving the advice. And I thought, why don't I actually just put it on the platform and see if anybody else would be interested? Because I'm actually intrigued by the skill of interviewing. I call it a skill because it's something that if you understand can really open doors for you and can change your life, getting the right job, starting off your career. So yeah, definitely a really important skill that I would love everybody to learn if they could.
It's the difference, right? Between getting people saying they want to get 6 figures and stuff like that, but those 6-figure roles are possible. But there's a skill to be able to get that.
Exactly.
Right? Like, not just anybody can just... I mean, if you had no interviewing experience, right, or you wasn't great at interviews, even if you got a good experience, they're not going to know that you're good, it's kind of weird, actually, in a strange way, right? You could have all the experience in the world, but if you're terrible at interviews, it's like, well, it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, and interview is really just about selling yourself, putting yourself in a great light. It is something that seems like, if somebody hears me saying this, it seems like you're just pretending or something like that, but you're not. If you learn how to position yourself in the right way, you can really showcase your skill better. And a lot of people are so nervous at interviews, and I understand why, but the nerves don't have to be there if you really prepare enough, if you know what you have to offer, and if you know that you're the prize. And this is something I learned from being in recruitment, because like everybody else, I was really nervous with interviews and I didn't really understand what it was about. But after doing recruitment and realizing how much companies pay to hire people, I've worked on projects where a company is paid 40, 50K for one person. The interview process is expensive, it's long, and you're making the company's lives or the hiring manager's life easier by knowing how to interview so they can give you the job. Do you see what I mean?
That's true.
So once you know how to interview, it becomes a different story. Of course, job hunting is a numbers game. You still have to apply to a few jobs. You still have to go through the motions. Yeah. But it becomes a different story. It becomes much more interesting when you're confident in yourself and you know what you have to offer, and that you're trying to convince the company to say, yeah, it's me. I'm the right person you're looking for.
Yeah. It's a very fundamental skill. And hopefully in this episode, we can help people gain a fundamental skill or improve on the fundamental skill that they may already have. So, you being a recruiter and being on the other side and helping people, land a role, what lessons did you kind of learn as a recruiter?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's really important to fully understand what the interviewer is looking for, and how you match to what they're looking for. That's pretty much it. So if somebody's interviewing you and they know they want you to have experience with perhaps project management. Let's say project management. If you come in with lots of stories of how you've, what your experience is with project management, and you can give them various different stories about that, it's much more easier for them to understand that you're the right person. It's easier for them to see you in that position. And not just understanding what the job is and what you have to offer, but also understanding why the job became available, what they're actually looking for. And one important part about interviewing is asking the right questions. So it's not just about you going there, being asked loads of questions. It's about you asking the right questions so that you can see if you can fit into the role that they're looking for. It's a two-way street, you know? The interviewer's trying to see if you're right for them, but it's equally important to see if they're right for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So asking the right questions about the job, about the people, about the processes, about the tools that they use, gives you a more open mind and allows you to curate your answers better to the questions that they're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say preparation is the most important thing. It seems very obvious, but it's how you prepare. So not just looking at common interview questions, finding out about technical or very specific job-related questions, doing lots of practice, because that actually makes you more natural. You might think you might make you robotic by practicing, but it makes you more natural because you have like a pool of knowledge to pull from because you've had the time to practice. And then once you're at the interview, asking the right question, but then following up on the responses by re-solidifying your experience. So say, for example, they do ask you, you ask a question about the team, what are the day-to-day activities of the team? And they'd say, we usually have team meetings on Mondays, and typically an individual might work on 2 projects per time. And then you can pull back to yourself, you can relate it back to yourself and say, well, in my experience, I usually work with 2 or 3 projects as well. And whilst doing that, these are the things that I do. Do you see? So you ask a question, you find out the answer, and then you relate it back to yourself so you can re-solidify why you're the right person. Yeah,
I like that. And it's almost like you're fact finding. And we're going to talk a bit more about that because I think it's quite important to be able to fact find, to kind of narrow in whether you're the right person. And also at the same time, you're finding out like, is this the right company for me? Like, can I see myself kind of working here? I wanted to ask you, right? So, you started For My Interview. What kind of motivated you to want to kind of share your experience being a recruiter and want to help people like, land like a role?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, first of all, myself, because I was able to change my career. So I did a whole career pivot from recruitment into proposal management. And in the process of doing that, I got a master's in pharmaceutical sciences. And I said, before I even finish my master's, I'm going to get a job. And that's exactly what happened. So it was like testing my own recruitment skills on myself. And then the other side is friends and family reaching out to me consistently. I'm like the go-to person to ask about CV-related, job-related, interview-related help and advice. And I find that I do find it interesting and fulfilling to give that advice. And I thought, this is really useful information that I don't want to lose, because in the process of teaching others, you also relearn what you know, like you re-solidify, you imprint what you learn on yourself and you don't forget it. So I was like, I don't want to forget it and I want to share this knowledge. And then it was just, and I've always wanted to create something online with what I know. And I thought this is really useful, especially in a time where the job market is really tough. People are finding it really difficult to find roles and they don't know where to start. And like we said, interviewing is a skill that's not taught. So what if there was someone teaching it? What if that was me?
And you're great at it. Like your videos on TikTok are amazing and they're getting like 100,000 of views because they're providing like that much value, right? So I think it's very, very important. So in terms of like interview formats, right? What are the different types of interview formats that people can expect, especially when they're invited to an interview?
Well, it depends on the company and the industry, right? But typical formats are one-to-one interviews. Usually they're face-to-face in person, but nowadays they're more online, virtual, Zoom, Teams meetings. There could be panel interviews, group interviews, presentations. So there's an array of formats of interviews, but typically you're going to be asked questions and you're supposed to provide relevant and job-related answers. So it's really about being able to answer the questions succinctly and providing what they want to hear, so to speak. And that comes with how you prepare and the strategies of how you answer the questions. And there's various strategies. For example, lots of people may have heard of the STAR method, which is great for answering behavioral and situational interview questions. The SMART method, which again gives you more in-depth pathway of answering a question. And my personal favorite, the CELL method, which is a strategy I developed for answering interview questions. It stands for story, evidence, and lessons learned, because in every question there's a story and you need to provide evidence of anything that you say about your skills, your experience, and your knowledge, and then what you learned from it, conclusion, evaluation, right? So it gives you a chance to really provide an in-depth answer to any question really that you're asked in an interview. If you're asked a strength-based question, what is your strength? You can give a story about, in fact, for that kind of question, a really good strength, if you have experience with the job you're applying to, is to talk about your experience that you have. That is your strength. And then you can give a specific skill that you learned and evidence of the skill. So if you say, you're a salesperson and you're really great at sales, you can talk about how many calls you make per day and what are your win rate. And then your lessons learned, give an example of what you learned from a specific situation of a difficult client or a really hard sale. That really makes it so that the interviewer doesn't have too many follow-up questions. Because when an interviewer is asking you too many follow-up questions, it means you're not giving enough. So you want to give enough that they're like, oh, wow, that's a really great answer.
Yeah, I understand. That's interesting because especially I've never really heard an interview being given enough. That's an interesting, I guess, perspective actually, because I guess from that point of view, you've almost answered everything that they need to kind of know, right? Imagine you had an employee who showed up to work daily, but they did absolutely nothing. You wouldn't be happy with that, right? Well, that's what happens when your business funds sit idle in a regular current account. Isn't it time to make money work for you? For us business owners, expenses like rent, taxes, payroll never stop. And they keep going up. Yet so many of us leave our business savings in accounts that earn little to no interest, missing out on potentially hundreds of pounds in passive income that could really help cover those costs. That's why I use Tide's instant savings account, which allows me to passively earn 3.81% AER Variable on my business savings. The best part, I can withdraw funds instantly with no fees, and my business savings is protected with FSCS protection on up to £85,000. We've partnered with Tide for this episode, and they're giving new members a special bonus. When you sign up and use my code SAVVYWALLET you'll get a £100 bonus when you open and fund a Tide Instant Savings account with £5,000 within the first 30 days. Setting up a Tide Instant Savings account is quick and easy with just 4 simple steps. To take advantage of this special offer, tap the link in the episode description and don't forget to use my code SAVVYWALLET to claim your £100 bonus. Boosted offer valid until the 1st of June 2025 for new customers only. Rate correct as of the 6th of February 2025. Visit tide.code/savings for up-to-date rates and key terms during the promotion and afterwards. So I guess at a high level, right, if we're thinking about preparing for interviewing, are we saying that you really should be identifying what kind of questions are going to come up and then trying to write your answers for like each of those methods beforehand?
Absolutely. It's really critical. And like I said, a lot of people might think, oh, I might sound robotic if I practice too many answers to questions. No, it's the foundation of knowledge that you're building that allows you to be able to pull stories from your mind when you're speaking to the interviewer. So you should have pre-prepped answers to questions. There's so much tools online that you can use to figure out what kind of questions you might be asked for your interview. Doing a simple Google search or using specific websites like Glassdoor or LinkedIn or Indeed, which will have loads of resource of how to interview, and what potential questions they might ask you for your industry or job type. And then creating answers for them and then practicing with somebody like a friend or family, or even just on your own, recording yourself, and then listening to how you answer the questions and seeing if you can give an even better answer.
Yeah.
And then when you are facing an interviewer, you have a pool to work from. And it's not just about you preparing in that way. When an interviewer is interviewing you, they also have a sheet that they work from, and they have pre-planned questions that they want to ask you.
Yeah.
And so they're preparing as well. So it's not, sometimes they are thinking of questions from the top of their head, but they have a format that they follow as well. And so everybody is prepared and everybody is sort of performing, and you just need to give, you just need to give your best performance.
Yeah.
Tell the right stories that are relevant to the role, to the skills that the role needs, to the tools that you need to do the job.
Yeah.
And you put yourself in a position to be seen as the right person.
So obviously preparation is key, but how can people kind of think about preparing answers that are exceptional, especially as they're, you know, you having to pre-prep? Because to be fair, when I've interviewed, I've always pre-prepped. I try and pre-prep as much as I can. And like when someone, I might be giving up the game a bit, but it depends on what type. If it's face to face, yes, you have to try and memorize it. If it's like, you know, one over Zoom, I normally have like my questions on the side.
Oh, that's actually fine.
Yeah, I normally do that. I just have the answer, so if they, and then just I split screen it, and it just makes it easy. I don't know if a lot of people do that. Do you do that? Is that something you do?
I have done that before,
cool.
actually,
Yeah.
and as long as you don't look like you're reading from somewhere, it can be. it should act as a prompt to remind you of things that you might want to say, and it's actually not abnormal. Even if it's a face-to-face, to have a notepad and pen and have your questions written down and say, oh, I prepared some questions. Here they are. Can I ask you these questions?
Okay.
But obviously in a face-to-face interview, you wouldn't be reading from your note. But it's not strange to have notes to prompt you to remember what to the things you might want to talk about, the questions you might want to ask, and to just remember important things that you don't want to forget to tell them.
And in terms of like preparing answers that are exceptional, because in this market as well, you have to try and really stand out, right? How can you, even within like STAR, like for instance, the STAR method, how can you make sure that whatever you're putting there is exceptional and it stands out? Yeah,
I mean, for me, it's the evidence. It's why I think the STAR method is great. But I think the CELL method is even better, potentially, because whatever you say, you need to be able to back it up with evidence. What is the proof of what you're saying, right? So, of course, you'll have a story that you want to tell. The evidence can be a variety of things, right? It can be, for example, your achievements that you've achieved in your day-to-day activities. They can be numerical things. For example, if it is a sales role and you do have to make 50 calls per day, adding the number, saying I don't just make calls per day, I make 50 calls per day, adds credibility. It shows that actually you're really hardworking because you're able to make this 50 calls. And then, and that shows that actually you're driven and you're experienced, because making that many calls per day shows that you have experience. So it's achievements, it's numerical evidence. It's evidence of the tools that you use as well, because that's really important, because in any job you do, part of it will be using tools to get the job done. Which is why, in specific roles, somebody, a job spec might say needs to have experience with Salesforce CRM or something like that. Again, that's evidence that you can do the job that you say you can do. So it's providing evidence for what you say you can do that really takes your answers to the next level. And then the cherry on top is adding the lessons learned, right? So what did you learn from this? What will you do differently if you were to do this again? Or what can you apply to a new role if you change roles, if you join a new company, what can you bring with you that adds value? And that just takes it even further because it shows you're thinking critically, you really understand your job, your role, and what you're doing and what the client might want. I say client, but the interviewer might want.
Let's go through the SEL method again, actually. So SEL is S situation.
S for story.
For story, and E is for evidence.
And
L
LL,
for
lessons learned. So,
okay, cool.
And it's easy to remember because you have to sell yourself
like
in an
that.
interview.
Yeah.
An interview is a sales process.
Okay.
You have to be able to say, hey, I'm the right person for this job. And these are the reasons why. And this is why I've learned. And this is what I can bring to the table. So literally that.
Yeah.
So story, evidence, lessons learned. And whatever question they ask you, you can answer a behavioral question, a situational question, even technical questions. If the question is, tell me about the time you had to deal with a difficult client, then your story is, well, in my last role, I dealt with so-and-so client and they were difficult because they thought the budget we provided to them was too high. And then you can tell them what you did to resolve the issue. And then the evidence will be you speaking to the client, having the phone call or the email trail to say, this is what I did to resolve the issue. I spoke to these team members internally to reduce the cost. I then liaised with the client and made sure that they understood that we wanted to help them out. And then it resulted in, the budget being reduced, the client being satisfied. And what I learned from this was how to deal with, how to handle difficult conversations, how to go back and forth or liaise with cross-functional teams to achieve a goal. Do you see what I mean? So you've got the story, you've got the evidence and the lessons you've learned. And these lessons can be applied in whatever new role you're going to.
Yeah. I like the SEL method. I might have to steal that for, next time. Watchers and listeners, I hope you're hearing this, man. A new method from Amie herself. I think that's absolutely amazing because it's like you're almost forcing yourself to back up what you're saying. You're not just saying it. Because I think a lot of people, when they prepare for interviews, they are making stuff up.
Yeah.
Right? Gotta call it what it is. Gotta call it, right? Or inflating things a little bit too much. And I think with that one, you're actually trying to provide evidence, because if you provide evidence, then it's almost proof to the person who's recruiting you that, yes, you can do this, right? So that's what I love about that. And also, not only that you're providing evidence, is the fact that you are also learning from the experience, which means that you've got a bit of, critical thinking, which I think is important. They always want to hire critical thinkers, So I guess the other thing that I want to think about, right, is how can people get better at interviewing? Because interviewing, like you say, it's a skill, right? So how do you get better at that skill of interviewing and preparing for it?
I think it just goes back to practice. If I can put it into 3 steps for someone. So in the first instance, you receive an interview invite for a particular job. You know what job you're going to be interviewing for. You might know the interviewer, and I'd recommend that you look them up on LinkedIn to just get a background, an idea of their background and how they got to where they are. And then researching the company, like going on the website and understanding what the company actually does, not just the department that you're applying to, but other departments, like the whole picture. Are there any current news about them, current affairs? And also understanding all the skills and requirements for the job. So going back to the job description and looking at what exactly they're looking for, comparing it to your CV and seeing if there's any gaps. And if there are gaps, then you need stories to explain those gaps. And that might just mean where you have transferable skills that could apply to the requirement that they have. You might not fit the job description 100%, you might fit it 80, 70, 60, even 50% sometimes. But if you manage to get an interview, that's great. It means you're somebody interesting. And so you can be confident that you could potentially get the job. So key is 1, in the preparation, understanding the company, the role, and how you fit into that. And then 2 is, like we said, it's really important to practice common interview questions, job-specific interview questions, technical questions, because those are the questions that really prove that you have the hard skills to do the job, right? And then the final thing is the soft skills. You as a person, how do you come across? And that starts from when you receive the email and you confirm to say, yes, I'm going to turn up to this interview, to when you actually turn up on the day or on the Zoom call, how you appear, how you conduct yourself.
Yeah.
Of course, if it's face-to-face, arrive on time. It's really important.
It's very important, right? So some people arrive into interviews late, like.
Absolutely. Even if it's a Zoom call, make sure you are at least 10, you're ready 10 minutes before you need to log online, and log in at least 5 minutes before and just wait. It's okay to just wait, because at least when they join the call, you're already there. And so there's no element of surprise because you're the one waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
And then dress the part. It depends on what kind of job you're going for. But if it's a corporate job, dress smart. If it's a more practical job, well, you have to dress according to what instruction they might have given you. But look the part. And of course, be polite and professional, So preparation is the number one thing. But if you split that into 3 things, it's preparing for the job and the company, preparing yourself and your skills, and then preparing your image and your soft skills, how you come across. As much as it's important to have hard skills, soft skills are really important as well. Can you build rapport with the interviewer? Can you put them at ease? Can you make it into a conversation? Because an interview should be a conversation. It shouldn't be a case of, oh, you're so nervous and it's just them asking you and you're just like sweating because you're so nervous. It should be, they ask you questions, you answer, and then you ask them back a question, and it's a conversation because you really are interested in what the job is, what they have to offer, and finding out if they're the right fit for you. It's not just about them, it's about you too. And it's really hard to think of it that way in this economy or in this state where it's so hard to find jobs that some people feel lucky if they get an interview. Even if that's the case, still know that you are the prize. If you are at an interview, it means you are potentially right for the job. So you don't need to be nervous. You just need to show them that, yes, it's me, I'm right for the job, so you can hire me.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the thing is, people are going to be desperate for a role because, yes, it is the economy that we are. But like you say, you have to keep your wits about you. You have to keep your nerves about you. And talking about, interviewing, the best interviewers, right? What kind of behaviors did they demonstrate? The ones that you've come across?
Yes. I think in my experience, the best ones are the ones who ask the right questions. And I know I keep going back to this question and answer thing, but it really shows that you're definitely interested in this role and you want to find out more so you can add value, because it's about adding value, right? That's why roles become available. There's a missing skill that the company needs, and you need to add value by providing this skill. So it's, what questions is this person asking me? And are the questions relevant? Are they well thought out? And why are they asking these questions? Are they asking because they genuinely see themselves in the role? Because in the way you're interviewing, you need to show the interviewer that you need to give the interviewer an idea that you could be a good fit for the role, and then show them by asking the right questions, right? Yeah. So show them that you do sit well into that role. So, for example, if somebody asks me, why did the role become available? And then it might just be because the company is growing. And then they ask a follow-on question. Okay, so what do you think of how do you think this department will grow in the next couple of years, in the next 3 to 5 years? That's really interesting because it shows that they're thinking of how they can fit into the department, where they could potentially grow within the department, and what does that mean for the company in terms of value added. So asking the right questions is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. And you've repeated that a few times, and it shows that asking the right questions is very important. I think we'll talk about maybe some of the questions that people can kind of ask, right? What about worse interviewers? Where did they go wrong, and why? What have you? Yeah, what kind of behaviors have you seen them kind of demonstrate? That's like, okay, yeah, this is where you may need to improve more to get yourself over the line.
Yeah, I guess again, it's so simple. Arriving late just doesn't do well for you. So already that says a lot if you arrive late to an interview, and that's where somebody can go really wrong. Not being prepared or understanding the role properly, or even understanding what the company is about, not researching the company. Imagine turning up to a company, you don't know what they do, you don't really know what the role is about, and when they ask you questions, you don't really have in-depth answers to give. That does not look good. And it's really important because you spend so much time at work, and these jobs can be life-changing, right? Because if you get into the right role, you build a career out of it. A lot of people describe themselves first as what they do, right? So it's really important.
It's true. We identify as that.
Exactly. To turn up and know what the company is about, know what the role is about, and be on time.
Yeah.
And it's very simple. It's actually not so complicated. Interviewing is really, it's simple enough. It's just you understanding and preparing well enough so you can leave a good impression, because first impressions count, and you're meeting strangers. You've never met them from anywhere, and you need to leave a good impression. So turning up right, understanding the role of the company, so basic, but so important.
So let's go deeper, right, into actually finding out during the interview, because you can do the preparation, right? But sometimes you still need to gauge, okay, how do I identify? Because I think the reason why I'm asking this question, right, is because I know a few people have spoken to me about it. They're getting interviews, but they're just getting rejected. It's like, so their CV is strong, they're able to get there, maybe they're prepared, but they're just not getting the role. So how can they kind of figure out what the employer is looking for?
Right now it's quite difficult because it's so competitive. And when there's so much competition, sometimes it's not even what you've done wrong. It's just that maybe there's quite a few people who are qualified for the role. And when it comes to that part, employers usually tend to go for who they like, because people make decisions, they buy things on emotion and things that they like, as opposed to just looking at the hard, cold facts, right? And if you got two candidates who are equal in experience and skill, but somebody was more personable, you'll go for the more personable person. So that's where we come back into the soft skills, putting the interviewer at ease, trying to find a way to connect with them, trying to turn it into a conversation, like I've said. So, personally, what I do is I try to give an interesting story from the very beginning of the conversation. So in the first, hi, how are you? I might give them a little nugget about myself to make them remember me, because when you start to know someone, they become more personable to you. You start to build rapport. They become more memorable. So for example, they might say, the interview might start and they say, hi, how are you? And then I might say, I'm doing great. And if the interview is on a Monday, I might say, I just had a great weekend where I did this, this, and this. The most interesting thing I've done that weekend, right? So maybe it's going to the cinema, it's going to a wedding or whatever. But it opens the door for more personable questions. And then that makes you more memorable. And then it becomes more of a like relaxed conversation. So soft skills, like making it a comfortable conversation is really important. And that adds to your likability factor. And like I said, as the interview's going on, asking them questions about themselves. So if they've asked you how you are, you've given them a nugget about yourself, you can ask them how they're doing. And if whatever they give you, you can build on that. And then it becomes a natural conversation. Because it's more than just giving talking about your hard skills that you can do the job. It really is more than that when it's so competitive. So standing out, apart from giving, evidence of your skill, your lessons learned, it's evidence of who you are as a person. And do you fit into their team? You need to understand their team. And it's more than just asking, what's the culture like at the company? Because that's a question that you can ask. And they're just going to say, yeah, it's great.
True.
So you need to be more specific, right? So you can ask questions about what the team think about, like what do members of the team say about the company or the department that they work in? And what's the most interesting team building activity they've done this year? It becomes a more in-depth and direct question that helps you to understand the team better. Of course, in an interview, you can't get to know a whole team because it's just a conversation, but it gives you more of an idea. And then when they tell you whatever answers they give, then you can respond by inserting yourself into that scenario. So if they say, team building activity we went to bowling or something, and then you can just add, oh great, I love bowling. I know it sounds very cheesy, it seems but it's like it's the full circle. You ask a question, you follow up, and then you insert yourself to make it look like you are the right person for that company and for that team.
And that's the thing, right? I think it's really, you're trying to stand out in a way, especially in this market, you're trying to stand out in a way where you can be memorable. You know what's it's crazy? I'm not going to tell the full story of this, but I remember, right? So when I was at university, I interviewed it was a phone shop, right? And I hadn't heard back for weeks. And then they called me back and they were like, I went to school with a famous person. They called me back. They say, "Oh yeah, I remember you because you're the guy that went to school with this famous person." I was like, "What?" I don't even remember what. This was years ago. This was when I was at university. I don't remember when I brought that person up. They were my friend at the time as well. So I don't remember in what context, but that's what they literally said to me. I was like, "Okay, cool. That's very, very interesting." So it's about being memorable, right?
Yes.
And for people to remember you, especially when there's like, you're even, right? So I'm going to mention this, right? I hope you don't mind, right? So I remember you telling me something about you doing a presentation. Can you talk a bit about that? Because I think you doing that helps you to stand out, right? So can you talk about that and any other ways people can stand out in an interview or make themselves more memorable?
Yeah. That's really interesting that you brought that up. I completely forgot about that. I was applying for a job which I wasn't fully qualified for. This is why I always say apply anyway. Even if you're just 50%, you think you can do the job, you understand what the job is about, apply. And particularly they wanted somebody with experience doing a specific type of clinical budget. I didn't have the experience, but I really wanted a job and I really wanted to learn. So I thought, how can I prove to them that I'm the right person to give an opportunity to? And I thought, first of all, I'm going to learn as much as possible about this type of budget so I can talk about it comfortably. So within the company I was already working in, I reached out to the team that were doing that kind of role and asked them questions about it, how they did the budgets, and I created my own budgets. And then I thought, in order for me to show them that I did this work, it's not just enough for me to tell them about it. And I had the idea to create a presentation about myself and my skills, to give them everything they needed up front so they can know who I am. And that allows them to give more directed questions or even to change their course of questioning, right? Because if everything is given up front and they can see what skill I have, then it changes the way the interview goes. Yeah. So I created an interview where I gave them information about myself, my skills, my level of experience, like what I really bring to the table, right? What are my core skills that would really add value to the role? And then I talked about how I learned about the type of budget that they're looking for, what I did. And then I showed them the example of the budget that I created, which showed them the level of work that I put into to really develop and gain the skill that they needed. And it proved to them that I was teachable, that I was proactive, and that I could do the job because let's face it, whenever you change companies, you always have to learn their processes anyway. Yeah. They will have different tools, they'll have different processes. So you have to learn that. And it showed them that I'm capable of learning because I went out of my way to learn how to do a particular style of budget that I didn't have experience with. And it really stood out to them and it was really impressive to them. Would I recommend everybody to do this? Potentially no, because it's not always necessary. And again, it depends because before I even created the presentation, I let the HR person know that I was going to do this and for them to give me just 2 minutes at the beginning of the interview to express myself and give my presentation, and they thought it was acceptable. It might be an instance where you might want to do that and they ask and they say, well, no, not really. We don't really have time. We're really pressed for time and that's okay. But you need to gauge the situation. You can do this. Ask upfront and say, I have this presentation ready. Do you have 1 minute for me to do it? It's really quick. Usually they'll say yes. But other ways that you can stand out is really just depending on the job that you're going for, going the extra mile to show that you can do the job, showing them the transferable skills that you have, right? And giving them something tangible, like the presentation and the example of the budget was something tangible that they could work with. And anything else that might come to your mind that you think might be useful for the role that you're applying to. So you might not need to do a live presentation, but for example, if you're applying, I don't know, for a role in finance and you need to prove to them that you understand balance sheets or whatever, it's possible that you could send them an email to say, hey, this is my experience with this, just to re-solidify what your core skills are. And another important one as well is after the interview to follow up. And there's lots of content online that says send a thank you email. But the thing is, it's not just about sending the thank you email. It's about what you add beyond the thank you. And I've done this before where I've sent thank you emails, but I've added extra information for the interviewer to know that I'm the right person. So typically what I would do is say, thank you, I had a great interview, because it's important that they know that you enjoyed the interview and what you thought about the interview and the company. And then re-solidify my skills. So I'd say, okay, if you hire me, this is what you can expect from me. I've got this amount of experience in using this and that tool. I've written this amount of budgets and proposals. And, I've contributed to improving processes internally. These are the reasons why you should really hire me. And if there's anything else that you spoke about in the interview that you feel like you need to give more information on, you can talk about that as well in your thank you email. You can say, we spoke about this particular experience, just to re-solidify my, knowledge on this, and you can give them more information. So it's not just saying, hi, thank you for the interview. It's, okay, hi, this is just a little bit more information so that you can remember. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't, but it's worth doing because it might just be the difference between you being hired and somebody else, right? It doesn't hurt to do. So yes, the presentation, yes, following on with the follow-up thank you email, and also just if you have questions that come up, right? Because sometimes you might have an interaction and you speak to the manager and you forget to ask something. It's okay to then email and ask the question, as long as it's a relevant question and it shows that you're really interested and you want to know, you want to learn. Then you can again reach out and ask the question, because that opens another channel for you to again sell yourself, right? So standing out is your personality, your knowledge, your hard skills, your soft skills. Yes, I hope that's helpful. That's useful.
Very helpful. And it is, again, it goes back to that point of you've got to try and be as memorable as possible. You don't want to be just like, no offense, but like another number to them, because these days they're interviewing so many people, so you want to stand out in some way. And as you were saying it, right, like in technology, a lot of the stages that we do when you're interviewing, of course you do like the soft skill stuff, but you do a lot of case study stuff as well. But you're absolutely right. Like, let's say you're going for like a design type of role, like, I don't know, like a UX designer, for example, there's nothing wrong with bringing your portfolio along and say,
Exactly.
okay, you don't have to do it at the start of the interview, but when it's like, oh, do you have any questions or anything else? That's the time for you to be like, oh, by the way, this is my portfolio. This is what I've been doing on the side. This is what I've done in my other companies. I think anything tangible, like you say, is always, it's hard to like almost say no to actual evidence of this is what I've done. Here you go. Right?
See, and it goes back to evidence, right?
Yeah.
Always provide evidence of what you've done, not just, verbally, but physically or technically, either in a presentation or sending an email to say, hey, these are my skills. This is evidence of my work. Yes. Providing evidence you can do the job is so important, because one key thing that especially new graduates or people, entry-level people, they always say, I need to find a job, but every employer wants you to have experience. How can I get a job if I don't have the experience? How can I build the experience if you don't give me an opportunity to interview? And that's really difficult. That's where building some type of evidence about what you bring to the table, what you can offer, adds value, because it's like, okay, this is what you're looking for, and this is what I have to offer, and this is what proves I can do it. And whether that's a portfolio, that's a presentation, that's really a case study of what you've done or a story that you can tell, that's evidence.
Yeah. So let's talk about these three things, right? What are the three things that people should do in every interview versus the three things that they should avoid in every interview?
Okay, so three top things you should do in every interview. Be personable, and I know it's hard because everybody's personalities are different. So it's really difficult to show your personality in an authentic way that is receivable to a stranger, because that's really what's happening when you're interviewing. But authenticity is key, right? So giving them those nuggets of yourself, activities that you've done, like I said, when you introduce yourself and you say, hey, this is why I'm great, I've had a great weekend, or I've had a great evening yesterday, I went to do this and that. It gives you the opportunity to be personable. So that's really key, and that ties into your soft skills. And another key thing that's really important, of course, is your technical knowledge and your skills. So making sure that you have enough stories depicting your technical knowledge and skills. You should have 3 key stories of that you tell in an interview, depending on the job and what the interview is looking for. Yeah. If you know the 3 top things that they're looking for, have 3 stories related to those 3 skills that they're looking for, so that you can tell them and explain it to them. And then can be the foundation of your interview. Then you're in charge, right? Because when you get into an interview, you want to get to a point where you're leading the interview as well. You're asking questions and you're telling stories according to the direction that you want to go. So having these stories available that are relevant to the 3 things or 4 things that you know the employer really wants is really important. So always do that. And of course, being punctual and organized, arriving on time, knowing who's interviewing you, looking up the person before you speak to them, looking up the company before you speak to them. That's really important. So your hard skills, your soft skills, and the stories that you tell. And in terms of what you don't do, and again, I guess we need to reiterate for people to really understand this.
Cool.
But you need to always ask questions. So what not to do is to not ask questions, right? So ask questions, have questions prepared, ask these questions throughout the interview. It doesn't have to be at the end. It can be throughout the interview, but not having questions is really not good. It shows that you're not serious about the job. You don't really know what the job is about, and you don't really want it, because why wouldn't you ask questions? In every other situation, you'd ask questions.
Exactly.
If you go to watch a movie, after the movie, you might speak to your friend and ask questions about what they think about the movie, right? Why wouldn't you do that about a job that you're going to be spending a lot of your time doing?
Yeah.
So not asking questions is not a good thing. And then I guess, not looking the part, you know. Again, it shows you're not serious. If you've got a corporate interview, dress smart. Don't come
in hoodies.
in trainers.
And all that, yeah.
Are you really serious about this? Is the question if you turn up like that. So don't turn up looking shabby. Don't turn up not looking the part. That's really important. And I guess those are the key things, because that's the most important thing when you've gone to an interview, right? You need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, cool. I think they make sense, and I agree with them. I think definitely soft and hard skills, because that's showing who you are and what you bring to the table. I think it's important for you to understand what you're bringing to the table. And then I guess on the other side is like being professional, right? Like, do you have an element of professionalism in what you kind of do? Are you on time because you need to be on time to meetings? Talking about meetings, people are not on time to meetings anyway. In the real world, that's the truth. But anyway, let's say in theory, you should be on time because it makes sense for you to be on time. So I was wondering, right, for people who don't have experience, right? So we talked about all these methods. We talked about STAR method. We talked about SEL method. You're an example of somebody that didn't have an experience and you landed a role. So for those people, how can they prepare, right? Because it's difficult for them, for example, to maybe use a STAR method, for example. How are they able to use maybe the experience that they do have to still shine for a role where they don't have the experience?
Yeah, that's where transferable skills comes into it. And even if you're somebody who has never worked before, you're a graduate, you're entry level, you still have experience that you can talk about. If you went to school, you went to university, going through university, completing all your assignments, doing exams, those are really character building things because they're not easy to do. And you need to be somebody organized, to plan your revision properly, to plan the submission of your dissertation properly. And again, it shows that you're hardworking, you're able to learn and apply knowledge, and you're able to work under pressure, right? So all of those are skills and experiences that could be applicable in a real job. If your job requires working under pressure, it's similar to the exam pressure, right? If your job requires you to create reports, etc., it's similar to writing reports at university, etc. So it's preparing in the way that gives answers to the potential questions that the interviewers might have, and figuring out what skills and experiences you already have that could apply to the role that you're going for. And it's not just about job-related experiences. It can be experiences such as travel or sports or instruments that you play, or any hobby or interest that you have, those, if you realize that the skills that you use to do those hobbies could be applied to a job, it's something worth talking about. Because what else do you talk about if you don't have any practical job experience? And then it's going the extra mile and actually trying to give evidence of how you would do a job, which is what I did with my presentation, right? I created a presentation. I created an actual example of a budget, showed it to them, right? So if you have no experience and you know the job requires you to write reports, why don't you create a sample report of what you would do and send it to them beforehand to say, hey, I know I don't have the experience, but I've learned a lot about creating reports. Here's an example that I've created. We can talk about this more in the interview. It shows that you're really confident and that you really want the job. And it allows the interviewer to make you, to see you as somebody that they could potentially work with because you're so proactive, right? So when you don't have experience, the most important thing is to prove that you have some type of experience that's applicable. And that's where you think about, make a list of your transferable skills and then compare it to the job description and see how can this skill that I have apply here? And then providing the evidence, right? Can I actually create a sample of the product that this company sells or the task that I'm going to be doing in this company? And then show it to them and then have a conversation and then ask really, really good questions in the interview about how the job is done.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they tell you how, then you can just back it up and say, well, actually, I understand that. And in this experience, I've done something similar. Again, transferring your experience to the role.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned hobbies, because I think a lot of people would discount that, because you can, like you say, you can get transferable skills from your hobbies. You can get leadership stuff from your hobbies, right?
Exactly.
Like if you're on a football team and you're the captain of the football team, that requires a level of leadership that I wouldn't say is too, dissimilar to working in the corporate world, but people would discount that and wouldn't call that out because they're like, oh, it's a hobby, right? Like a job is, I think because we get paid for a job, we kind of separate it. Like it's, the skill is the same of what you're doing. Like even for me, obviously I'm doing this podcast on the side. There's a lot of skills that I've learned as part of this, right? In terms of my communication skills that I can talk about, right? In terms of the fact that I'm a public speaker now, right? But some people might discount and be like, oh no, you're just doing the podcast on the side, right? You haven't developed, but you have, right? You've developed something, you've got evidence of you being able to do something. So I think it's very, 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 very interesting.
Yeah, it's looking beyond the job specific things.
Yeah.
And looking at yourself as a whole person. Obviously, there's some experiences that may not be applicable at all. But for the most part, you would be doing something on a daily basis or have some experience that is applicable, that isn't job related, but actually the skill you use to do that thing is applicable, right? So looking at yourself as a whole, I like to do this matrix where in order to figure out whether you're the right person for a job and to sell yourself properly for a job, you kind of put down all, I suppose, aspects of yourself on paper. Think of the skills that you might use to do whatever it is that you've put on paper, and then see how it applies to the job, right? So it could be one column is hobbies. You write down the hobbies that you do. What skills do you use to do those hobbies? Then the next thing might just be your education. And then the next thing might just be something you do for leisure that is really fun to you, whether it is playing an instrument or just traveling or just even exercising, right? What skills do you use to do those things? You need determination to exercise and consistency, right?
True.
That's really important. And then you can see the key skills that you have to offer, and then you can apply it to the job and say, actually, I have consistency, I'm hardworking, and I can work under pressure because I've got this experience. I know it's not direct to the job, but I can apply this experience here.
Yeah. That's interesting. I never thought about it like that. You see, look, we're learning new things all the time. So I wanted to ask you some behavioral questions, right? To help people think about how to form their answers. So one, how do I describe myself? I to be fair, I asked people that on the podcast, so I feel bad now for asking people that on the podcast. But I'm not asking people as in because I'm going to give you money for the answer. You can answer it however you want to answer, right?
Yeah.
But how do people kind of figure that out?
Yeah, see, that's an open-ended question, and because it's open-ended, you can ramble, and it's important not to ramble in an interview, to get to the point and to direct them to what you want them to hear, which is that you're the right person, you got the right core skills, both hard and soft and technical skills, right? And one method that I like to use to answer that question is called the list method. I like to call it the list of three method. I know people know about giving lists to give an answer, but I coined the term the list of three method, and it's one of the methods I talk about in when I give my example answers on social media. So I would say, to answer that question and to give it more direction in the of where you want to go, you can start by saying, I've got I can describe myself in three ways, or I would speak about myself with these three qualities. And then you can list specific qualities or specific experiences that you have, and it gives you more direction to answer the question. So if you say, tell me about yourself, then you say, I will describe myself in three ways. Well, I'm somebody who really enjoys traveling. And then you talk about how you travel and the places you've been. And then you can say, I also have experience doing a particular type of job, right? So then you can talk about the experience that you have doing that job, and then a final point that you want to add to it, right? So for a job-related interview question, say you're applying, let's do proposal manager, because that's what I do. And they say, tell me about yourself. Then I would say, I can describe myself in 3 ways. First of all, I really enjoy my role as a proposal manager, and I've done both clinical and non-clinical proposals. And the reason why I enjoy it, because I love process-driven roles, and I have experience writing this and that proposals, right? And then you can give a personal one where I do actually enjoy traveling, so I could talk about traveling. Do you see what I mean? And then, I enjoy traveling. I've been to this and this country, and that opens the personable aspect, because they'll be interested to hear where you've gone to, what places you've been, and they might even be able to relate and say, "Oh, I've been there as well." And then finally, you can talk about any specific skill that you think will be useful for the job. So, for example, I would say, I have experience using Salesforce to manage my proposals. Is that what you use in your company? And then it opens the door for another question to come from that. But then it shows that you know what you're talking about, you're understanding the role, and you also want to find out about the company and their department.
Interesting.
So using the list method to add structure to your answer, turn an open-ended question to a directed answer.
I like that. And it's like you're almost going through first list of 3, you're structuring what your answer is, and you're almost also putting it back on them, because you're trying to understand from their perspective. Okay, what are you looking for? Right, I've said this. What's your follow-up going to be? So I can really hammer home what you really want, right? That's amazing. That's really amazing. So, the other question I had for you, right, is, and I think this is challenging for people, because people know how to say their strengths, but they struggle to say their weaknesses. So, what's your greatest weakness? That sometimes that comes up as a question. How can people kind of navigate that question as well?
It doesn't have to be a tricky question, because you can keep it simple, right? There's 3 ways you can approach this question. You can approach it in terms of the job itself. You can approach it in terms of turning a strength into a weakness. Is something that I actually talk about on my channel. And then you can approach it in terms of what you're looking for, right? So let me give you examples. In terms of the job itself, you don't want to say a weakness that's really critical to doing the job. So if you know the job really wants you to be good with Excel, then you say your weakness is Excel. That's not a good answer.
Don't be too honest.
So no, but
don't be too honest.
You can look at the job spec and say maybe there might be something about something that is not a key skill. You can say that's a weakness of mine, but I'm working on that already. So whatever answer you give, you have to say that you're working on it, or you've worked on it, and you're building your experience on it. So say, for example, is a job that requires you to do Excel, but there's an aspect to it that requires you, I don't know, maybe reaching out to lots of vendors and I guess managing that process, and maybe you don't have experience with that. So you could say, first of all, lead with the positive. Say what you do have experience with and what your strong points are, and then say what your weak points are, and then say how you're dealing with it or how you worked on it. So an example would be, I have really strong experience with Excel, and I've got 5 years of experience using that tool. However, I don't have that experience dealing with managing vendors. However, I've looked up the process of managing vendors, and this is what I can expect to do from it. Do you see how the answer shows them what it takes? You take it back to your strength, and then you show them a weakness that isn't too important to doing the job. The other example is, when it comes to the job, is looking at what the job entails and then saying that the opposite of that would be something that you wouldn't like. And again, that sounds tricky, but say, for example, the job requires you to be constantly interacting with people. So it's a customer-facing role. You're on the phone a lot, or you're in person speaking to people a lot. obviously you need to be a people's person to do that job, right? So you could say a weakness of mine is working in a position where it's not fast-paced or customer-facing. I really enjoy doing that. And I know this job requires that. And that's actually a strength of mine. So in a position where it's not so busy, where it's not customer-facing, that's something I would see myself not thriving in. That's a situation I wouldn't thrive in. However, if, for an instance, that situation does come up, this is what I would do to mitigate that circumstance. But however, I know that this job is very fast-paced, so it's perfect for me. Do you see what I mean? So it's bringing in the positive, bringing in the negative, and then giving evidence of what you're doing, what you would do to solve the problem. So it's really a problem-solving question. Like, you have a weakness. What have you done to solve that problem? And actually, can you tie it back to a strength?
I like that. I like the answer because it's really, again, it's critical thinking. Are you thinking about addressing your weaknesses? Because at the end of the day, you're always in any role, right? When you're trying to grow, you always ask for your improvement points, right? Is at the end of the day. So the fact that you can answer that and also have the mind to say, okay, this is my weakness, but like I said, this is how I'm going to kind of address it. I think that's amazing. I think that's an amazing answer. And if somebody answered that to me, I'd be, wow, I'll give you the job right now. No, I'm kidding. It would have to impress me a bit more, but I think that would be quite impressive. So
obviously you would have prepared for these answers, and you can give a better answer. I'm just speaking from the top of my head, but the strategy for asking a negatively orientated question is to focus on the positive, bring in the negative, and then come back to a solution of how you solve the problem. Right? So that's how you have to think about it. And then not given a weakness that's actually critical to the job.
Really let's hope we don't do that. So it's you're always trying to, again, back it up with evidence, but show how you can still positively affect it, even if it's a negative related question. Like, tell me a time where you, I don't know, like you struggled in this situation where you found the client challenging or whatever, right? It's those questions, like you say, are designed to say, okay, how do you deal with it? Because work is a challenge at the end of the day, right? It's tough. It's not, some days are okay. Some days are, you're firefighting, right? So how do you firefight? How do you, you're not just going to be like, okay, I'm packing up and I quit, I'm gone.
Exactly. You have ups
They
and
don't
downs.
want that kind of people, right?
Yes.
No. How are you dealing with this issue in front of you, right? That's effectively what you're trying to answer. So, we talked a bit about it being harder, right? And again, I've spoken to people that have told me they've had loads of jobs, got to final stage, nothing, right? What is happening in the market? Why do you think it's such like a challenge for people to like land roles? Can you give a bit of an insight from your perspective? What do you think's happening?
Honestly, it is tough right now for everyone, really, in terms of the job market. And we have to look at the bigger picture, right? Currently, there's an economic downturn happening, economic uncertainty. And when that happens, companies react. Everybody reacts, really, but companies might freeze hiring because they're not sure what the economy is looking like. So they put the vacancies on hold. Also, people might not change jobs more frequently because when the economy is going great and there's, opportunity, people leave their jobs more likely, right? So in a state of economic uncertainty, companies freeze hiring and people stay in their jobs, right? So it means that there's a lot of competition. There's a huge competitive pool, but not enough jobs to go around. Not only that, of course, there's now the trend of people working from home. So there's a lot more remote roles. So the job market is actually more globalized now. Somebody could be 1,000 miles away doing a job in London or Germany, etc. So now there's no restriction on where somebody should be. So the talent pool was huge. So it's incredibly competitive. So it makes sense that you could be applying for lots and lots of jobs and not getting interviewed. Or if you do get interviews, there's so much competition that, it comes down to sometimes luck or just somebody being a better fit culturally to a company. And it's difficult because what can you do about that, right? And the only thing you can do is to continue to search for jobs. Keep searching for an opportunity, right? And think it's outside of the box of how to get these opportunities, right? I always say that you need to make yourself a person that opportunity chases, right? You don't chase the opportunities, they chase you. But how do you do that? You have to make yourself somebody that opportunities come to.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You can get yourself educated. You can upskill yourself. You can gain a new experience, whatever it is you're looking for. Say, for example, you want to work in a particular role, but you don't have any experience. You can volunteer your time to a company that does something similar and just to gain the experience, right? If you want to get into project management, you don't have any experience, you can do a course, right? You're making yourself somebody that an opportunity could come to, right? And then the next part of that is not giving up, being determined and consistent enough to keep applying, keep searching. And it's really hard. It's really hard when you keep getting rejection, because although it's not personal, it is. It doesn't feel good to be rejected, especially when that rejection relies on you paying rent, you putting food on the table. So I fully understand it's not easy. But then you can think outside the box. You can start your own opportunities. For example, some people have started businesses. Some people have fallen back on their hobbies and seen if they can monetize their hobbies, if it's something that is monetizable, if that's a word, while they're searching for an official opportunity in employment. So it's really important to have the right mindset, because rejection and the feeling of failure can really damage your self-esteem and confidence and your ability to even have the enthusiasm to try. So you have to remember that it's tough for everyone, but people are still getting jobs. So if people are still getting jobs, it's possible that you can still get jobs. And what do people do in order to get these jobs? They continue applying. They're consistent. They don't give up. They learn from every interview. And it's so important to learn from interviews. I always say, after you've interviewed, take a moment with yourself to reflect on the interview. What questions did they ask you? Write down those questions. Those questions could be useful for a next interview, you know? Prepare answers to those particular questions you were asking in an interview. Because if you're applying for a certain type of job, and you're getting interviews for that particular type of job, it's likely that the questions they ask you will be similar across companies. So if you've already been asked a question in one company, you don't get the job, you can practice answering that question again for the next interview. You see what I mean? So you can practice answering questions that you've been asked. You can think about how the interview went, what you learned from that interview, and how can you apply it to the next interview. Every opportunity in an interview, every interview is an opportunity to learn and to do better the next time. So it's actually good if you're getting interviews and maybe you haven't landed a role yet. But it's good that you're getting an interview, because you're learning, you're gaining experience in the market, you're understanding what employees are looking for, what they're paying for. And all of that can build into your interview experience. And that leads to you being consistent and gaining the confidence to finally get the job. So it's a tough market for reasons beyond us, right? It's a global thing. But being consistent, learning from every interview or every interaction that you have with a potential company, and keeping a broader mind, looking for opportunities outside of the particular one you might be looking for. You know, doing something on the side while you're waiting for the job that you really want.
Yeah. And there's resilience at the end of the day, right? I think you've got to definitely be resilient in this market, but you've also got to, like you say, like, think outside of the box. You know, I don't use LinkedIn crazy. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not like massive on LinkedIn. However, LinkedIn is such an untapped opportunity. Although I don't even use it that much, I'm not active, I still get messages from people saying, oh, Ato, I've got this role for you. I'm not interested, but I'm like, okay, wow, like, this is, imagine I was super active. Like, how much more opportunities would you get? I don't think my LinkedIn is anything crazy. I'm not going to lie. Like, honestly, if you go and see it, it's not, I don't do much. I don't really post much, but it just shows you, even with that minimal effort, I'm still getting people come to me. So imagine this is a job seeker and you're putting in a lot of effort into this, you could really like have so many people coming towards you. You're not even having to almost put in, you're still applying, but you're applying, but people are also coming to you. So it's like double the effort in some interesting way, right?
Yeah, and that ties back to opportunities coming to you, right? What are you doing to put yourself out there? What are you learning? What actions are you taking so that opportunities land on your feet, right? So putting yourself out there is one on social media like LinkedIn and now Glassdoor, because Glassdoor even has communities that you can put yourself on and learn about companies, understand what companies might be looking for, what kind of questions they ask, you know? When you're taking action, you will get result. It might not come in immediately, but if you're learning from the actions that you're taking, the experiences that you have, and applying them to any new opportunity that comes your way, eventually you will land something. It might take some time. It might really knock you down sometimes when you keep getting those rejections. But if you don't give up, you do get results.
So I want to talk about salary, right? Because I think that's important, right? Because that's part of the interview questions. They're very good at asking you, you know, at the beginning, right? So in terms of salary expectations, right? What's the rules for asking for what you really want?
Yeah, that's a good one. First and foremost, you'll get the theme that the most important thing to do is to prepare for your interview. And that means preparing for a conversation about salary, right? And the best place to start is just searching online to see what the current rate is for the job you're applying for, right? You will know what you're being paid, but you want to see what other people are being paid as well. And there are resources online that you can use to figure out what is the going rate for the job that you're applying to. And then whatever you find online, because it's not concrete, right? There's always variables with these things, and it's an average usually. So you need to understand what's your ideal salary that you really, really want. What's the salary that you would never expect, and what's the middle ground that you would be happy with, but it's not the ideal, but you'd be happy with. Once you know those numbers, it's easier to have a conversation about salary at the end if you get to offer stage. I wouldn't recommend asking, you know, an interviewer or recruiter about salaries immediately on the first conversation because
how much am I getting paid? Fair.
It's not good interview etiquette. But if you're having continual conversations with the recruiter, it's important to get an idea of what the pay package is, what they're offering. And it goes beyond just money. What other benefits are they offering? You know, how many holiday days? Is there a sign-on bonus, etc.? I actually got myself into a habit of asking for not a sign-off bonus, but an office setup bonus because I've received that in the past.
Interesting. Office setup like for working from home?
Yeah, because I work from home, right? So I always ask, is there like a bonus for me to set up my home office, etc.? And I've received in the past.
Wow. Interesting.
I always ask for the highest amount that I can. I typically say, ask for 20% or more, the minimum 20% or more of what you're on. Right?
Okay.
And
as in, so you're on a salary and you ask your new company for 20% or more. That's your minimum. Okay.
And again, once you've asked a question about, you know, the pay package and they give you an idea, they might give you an idea up front, or they might say, you know, I don't have an answer for you yet, but what are you expecting? Right? Because that's what they do sometimes. You wouldn't say what you're currently on. The best thing to do is to say what the current market rate is.
Okay.
A way to phrase this to say something like, well, I'm currently interviewing for jobs that are around, give a range. Never give a specific number, but a range. So that are between, I don't know, 60 to 70K, give a range. And then you can ask, is that within your budget? And then they can say
I like that.
yes or no.
Yeah, so you're flipping it.
Yeah. So then you would say, okay, I'm I'm currently interviewing for roles that are between 60 to 70K. Ideally, I'm looking for 70K. Always go for the top end because you already know what your number is, right? You know your number is 70K. You know that you'd be happy with 65K, and you definitely will not consider anything that's below 60K, right?
Yeah.
So you let them know what ideally you want and then ask, is that in your budget? And they can say yes or no. And if it is in your budget, then you go ahead with the interview. If it's not, then you can push it back on them and say, well, let me know what your budget range is so I can understand what you're looking for. Because I am interviewing for other roles that are similar. Even if you're not, you can say that because it shows that you're competitive, right? You're in the market, you're interviewing, and you're somebody that employers want. And then when it comes to that point of negotiation, I would say if they don't give you exactly what you want, it's always important to always ask for more. So if they give you an offer, say you really want 70K, but they give you 65, it's okay to push back and ask for that 70, or say, phrase it in this way. Always lead with the positive. It's so important to be positive with these kind of conversations. Thank you so much for this offer. I'm so excited about this. I'm really keen to work for this company for this and this reason. However, this salary is not what I'm expecting. Is it possible that we could push it towards the 70K mark? Because ideally, that's what I've been interviewed for. That's what I'm expecting. And you can see what they say. I would always say just give one counter offer.
Just one?
Yeah, in terms of money-wise. In terms of the money. Okay. Don't do back and forth because that it doesn't always end well if you do that.
Fair.
If they're adamant that the amount is 65 and that's the best they can do, then you can try and push for other things. You can try and get more holiday days or a sign-on bonus or an office setup bonus or whatever other benefits that you know the company offers. And this is something that you could potentially search for on the company website, or maybe something you would have asked during the interview process, or maybe just something that you research online about potential benefits that companies can offer. And you can ask, is it possible that these benefits could be added? And then you can see what they say. And then you have to know what your yes number is and your no number is. You know, if it turns out it's not the best offer, but it's good enough and they've given you the extra, day or two in holiday days or some type of bonus to sign on, then that's something that you could potentially accept. The thing is, you always have to push for more, and it's worth doing that, because if you don't ask, you don't get. And their budgets might be bigger than they're leading you on to.
So it's probably could always be bigger than what you think.
Exactly. So it's always worth asking, and it's always worth going for the highest range possible. Obviously, realistically high. You know, if you're entry level, don't go for a director's.
I want 6 figures.
Yeah.
I want 115.
Yeah. But if you know your entry level and entry level's 25K, push for 30K.
Okay.
32K.
Yeah.
See if you might actually get 29K.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, those are great negotiation tips. And I feel like you've covered every type of angle. And I appreciate the whole, trying not to get back and forth too much. I think you're right. It is, you do want to sound appreciative, but also firm in that, okay, I appreciate what you've given me, but I'm looking more for this. Don't try and just bulldoze them over. Try and come to a common middle ground with them. I think is
exactly
quite important, right?
You want the win-win situation, whether it's you get the 70K that you want or you get close 67. It's still a win because it's really close, right? Depending on what you're really looking for.
Yeah.
But what is your win-win number? And that depends on the conversations you've had leading up to that point of negotiation, right? Because in an interview, you're supposed to be finding out about the company, the job, what you're going to be doing, and the salary and the benefits. If you don't know enough about that because you haven't asked the right questions, it becomes difficult at the end to negotiate. Yeah. If you're not asking for salary from the beginning, not on the first conversation, but from the beginning of the interaction, maybe the second interaction, because you're going to speak to a recruiter multiple times before you speak
and
to...
they'll ask you as well.
They will ask as well. And you need to always go with the highest number realistically possible for you.
Yeah.
And you just might get it. And I've personally negotiated salaries where I've gotten 40% or more of my previous salary. And I always advocate for it. And I'm never I never see these conversations as awkward anymore, because you can't lose if you've gone for the highest that you could, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes more of like an interesting back and forth rather than a nerve-wracking, scary thing to do.
Yeah. I think you just got to be comfortable. At the end of the day, it's business. Like, you know, you've been on the other side. This is business for them.
Yeah.
They see it as a business. For them, they're not nervous. They've got their number in mind. They've got the highest they'll go to. That's it.
Yes.
Right? If you are that or below, happy days for them. If you're above, then they'll just be like, look, maybe we'll try and get it, but it's unlikely that they will, right? So for them, it's not really a problem. But you're there. Oh, am I gonna I think it's just being more comfortable having a conversation with another human being. You're having a conversation with
exactly.
a human being, right? This is not, I get it, the job is precious to you and stuff like that. But I think it's important to do that. So let's assume somebody's, you know, got on this role, they've gotten the salary they want. What are the things that they should be thinking about to make sure that they can, you know, pass their probation?
Yeah. Okay. So when you join a new company, the first thing that you might do is get to know the people in your team and any other teams you might interact with. That's really important, because usually most jobs are team efforts, right? And the more people you know, the better you can do in your role, because you can ask the right people for help if you need the help. And more than likely you will be working with other people, and you want to build rapport, you want to ask for help comfortably. And you want to be able to, I suppose, comfortably defend yourself if you need to. And defend doesn't have to be in a negative situation. Yeah. It just might be, you know, you need help with something. They ask what help you need, and you're able to advocate for yourself. Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. So you need the right contacts and to be able to advocate for yourself. So of course, when you join your new company, you want to be on your best behavior, I guess. You want to show that you're energized and you're ready to learn and you're ready to do your job. You want to learn the tools as quick as possible and understand their processes as quick as possible. Yeah. But more than that, having somebody that you can reach out to for help is really important. For example, in my role, I work with cross-functional teams to get my proposals done. Yeah. And if I have a good rapport with someone, it's easier for me to maybe just send them a Teams message to ask them to do something in a quicker time frame than going through the official channels. But that can only be done because I've built the rapport. I've networked internally. Yeah. So I think that's one of the key things you need to do when you join a company. Network internally to understand who does what. And that puts you in a strong position to ask for help, ask for favors when you need it, and get your work done in a quicker time frame, and get support when you're under pressure. Yeah. You know, you need to deliver. Is there somebody you can reach out to that can say, hey, please help me with this? You know, I need to deliver this by this date. It's more difficult to do if you haven't built the rapport. So obviously, be prepared to learn. Be prepared to learn the processes, the tools, etc. But networking is really important. And it's just not external networking, it's internal networking within the company. Yeah. So you can get the job done effectively. And show that you're a part of the company, you're a team player, and you're a part of the culture. Yeah, and it's important. You've got to definitely show up, especially for those getting that probation. You got to, you work so hard, especially in this market, to get through to that. So on the opposite side, though, for the people who unfortunately maybe have not been successful yet, but they've got the interview and then done it, what should they be focusing on for their next steps? Yes, and again, going back to reflecting on your interview experience, I actually have an interview tracker tool. It's a spreadsheet that gives you prompts on what to do after you've interviewed and you haven't gotten the job. Yeah. It's on my website, formyinterview.com. Basically, after you track your interview, what company, what job, who you interview with, and then after the interview, in your reflective moment, you write down what questions you've been asked, how you answered them, how you could improve on the answer. You take note of anything that the interviewer may have told you that you think is important in the interview, and you look that up because that might be important for the next interview. And then you write your lessons learned from that experience. And again, I love lessons learned. So it's going back to the SAL method, right? what did you learn? What could you have done better? What did you do good? Because that's important as well. So what did you do good? What didn't you do good? Could you have done better? How will you do better the next time? And that really prepares you for your next interview.
Yeah.
It removes the nerves. And it's like striking while the iron is hot. So you've learned, and you keep applying for jobs. You keep applying, because that's really important, right? It's a numbers game. You don't just get one interview and then you stop. You need to have multiple opportunities going on. So while you're securing interviews, you're still applying for jobs. The next interview, you have a base to work from. Okay, I've interviewed, I didn't get the job, but this is what I learned.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm going to apply it to this next interview. If I don't get the job, the cycle continues. Apply, interview. If you don't get it, learn from it, use in the next interview until you land the job. And you document this experience. And this becomes actually a database of knowledge for you. Going forward, you can refer back to this database of knowledge of your interview experience. Even if you're progressing in your career and you're going to the next level, the process of interviewing is a skill. And the things that you learned in your previous role will jog your memory. Like, okay, I remember this is what happened, and this is what I did better that landed me the job. I could do this again. You see? So tracking your interview experience, being organized, is really important.
Like you say, it's very important for people to, these are skills, are life skills that we don't learn. Like you mentioned, money. We don't learn how to interview, and interviewing can open the doors for, look, those 6 figures you want, it can open a door for that, right? So it's very important. Where can people find you, and where can people get the interview guide if they're obviously looking forward to it as well?
Yes, so I'm on all social media for my interview, and the guide will be on my website. So it's on my socials, link in bio, the guide will be there. But when it does come out, I'll let the audience know.
It'll probably be, by the time this episode comes out, it probably will be in the description. So you don't have to worry about it. If you definitely are interested in the guide, it'll be all the details, and Amie's socials will also be, as usual, in the description of this episode. It's been great speaking to you, Amie. Thank you so much. You shared so much. And I think, again, especially at a time, it's going to be interesting in 2025 what it's going to be like. The job market in 2024 I think for some people it was all right. For some people it wasn't great. 2025 might be looking upwards. I don't know. I can't tell. The interest rates are not the best. So it's a little bit mixed, I'll say. But hopefully, with this episode, it helps guides people to, a path where they're able to maybe potentially land something. I think that's very, very, very important.
Absolutely. We don't know what the job market would be like. Hopefully it improves. I'm really hoping that it does, actually. I think it will. But it doesn't matter the economy. You still need to learn how to interview. And it's still an opportunity that will open doors no matter what's going on in the world. So hopefully this guide is really useful. I'm hoping for the best for 2025.
Same here. Do you have any final words for watchers and listeners?
Yes, I would say, and I think we touched upon this throughout the interview, but taking action is really important. Opportunities don't come to you if you don't take action. You can't become an opportunity magnet if you don't take action, right? So take action. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to achieve, whatever job you want to apply for, take action sooner rather than later. And that action can lead to exponential results that are positive beyond your imagination. Right? So action is where it starts.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those final words. I think that's so important, especially in 2025. That's the theme we want to, start 2025 with. Thank you so much, watchers and listeners, for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you next week's episode.